Have you ever seen a hare in a field and thought to yourself, is that really a hare? Or is it a witch in disguise? Greetings, my friends. Good to see you again. Today's story is going to be about a hare. But not your typical brown hare. Oh, no. This one is very, very special indeed. This one is called the White Hare. Our story starts in Long Compton in Oxfordshire. 3 boys, Will, Jack and Lewis, were out hunting rabbits in Barton's Grove. As they were hunting, they were just passing the time, telling each other tall stories. Some of them, most of them in fact, were about witches. For it was said there were lots of witches in Long Compton, so much so in fact that they could roll a huge bale of hay up Long Compton Hill. But they search and they search, still nothing. And yet one of them spots a white hare. Big it was, with fur as pure as driven snow. And they spotted it. But it noticed them too quickly, and it darted off into the darkness. Damn, that could have been a good catch, they thought. But they kept going and going, and they found nothing. So they all suggested, let's just go home. It's getting too dark anyway. So they all started to head off back. Some of them would catch glimpses of the white hare again, darting through the darkness. Sometimes if they crossed a field, they would see it just dancing in ever-shrinking circles before darting back again. And the further they got, the closer the white hare got. Until finally, they were walking down a stretch of pathway, and they all felt a feeling in the back of their heads. So they turned round and they saw the white hare standing in that pathway, looking at them. And wherever they moved, they sort of made little dancing movements like this, trying to gauge what was going on. And the hare followed. It was like they were glued to their shadows. And they were really scared by this. So they decided to bolt off to one of their houses. Luckily, it was Duffer's Close. It was the closest one. And they got there just in time. They leapt over the garden fence, breaking pots and trampling over poor flowers in the process, trying to get the door open. They're all struggling to find the key, trying to open the door, until finally, it's like in a cartoon, if you will, they would just crash into the house, all falling on top of each other, getting all sore and achy. And then they turned around again and they saw the white hare. It was perched on top of the garden wall they had just leapt over. It stared at them with moon-mad eyes, glossy and pale, as if the moon itself had duplicated itself and plopped into the skull of that hare. And if, like entranced, some form of spell has washed over the boys, they could hear a voice in their heads, and this voice told a chilling tale. A tale about an old woman. An old woman called Old Nan. Now, she was a cunning woman. She'd be the person you would go to if you needed a cure for an ailment. You needed a midwife, and you couldn't go trouncing all the way over to the local town, if you will. And she was very versed in those kind of skills. She was a respected member of the community. So much so that one day, a drunken man, a labourer, if you will, called James, had just come out of the pub after having too much to drink, too much ale, too much cider in his belly. And it was messing with his head, that he was wandering around the town, pointing at everyone he saw, cursing them, thinking that they were a witch or a warlock. Now, old Nan didn't like this very much. She knew James when he was just a wee boy, and, you know, it's just not right to start just cursing people out in public. So she confronted him. "What's all this about, young James?" she asked. But then old James turned round, looked at old Nan, and accused her even more of being a witch, and started to panic. So much so, in fact, that he picked up a scythe that was nearby and struck old Nan right on the head with it. His reasoning for striking the head in particular, there was an old saying, if you were to cut a witch above the breath, which means above the throat, above the mouth where the breath would come from, then whatever spell they had placed upon you would be cancelled out. Curse lifted. Unfortunately, James struck a bit too hard. It killed her. And that's how many people found them. Old Nan, stiff as a board, bleeding out of her head. James, sickle in hand, trembling, but also kind of, I don't know, relieved that his thinking might have just saved his life. But not so. He was found and put in prison. He was later to be tried for murder. But James, his psyche had already been broken. He kept this pretense. He kept thinking that he was cursed. He thought he had killed the witch that did it. And this was back in the time where, you know, they didn't really try people for witchcraft anymore. They probably didn't even believe it. So they didn't hang him. Instead, they kept him locked up because they thought he was mad. Now, as you all know, my friends, hares have really long ears. And a specifically pale one was lurking around his cell and overheard everything. He still thought that he was being cursed by a witch. He claimed that there was witches everywhere. There was an entire coven in Long Compton, and that all of his sorrows, all of his misdoings was all because he was under the spell of one witch and her evil eye. They didn't take him seriously, however, and he ended up dying in prison, alone, cold, starving probably. And you would have thought that would be revenge enough for old Nan's murder. Unfortunately, no. It did not wash away the deed. And ever since, a white hare has haunted Long Compton ever since. This white hare, old Nan in a different form. She wasn't maybe a witch, but maybe her ancient knowledge gave her the power to shapeshift. Who knows? But the voice, fading away from their minds, finally told them a bit of advice. To always treat your elders with respect and kindness, but also to watch out when you're hunting, especially on a full moon like tonight. And with a cackle, the hare turned round, hopped off the wall, disappeared into the darkness. And the boys' lives were changed from that day on. They didn't hunt rabbits again or anything of that kind, and also they were kind and respectful to all of the elders in their little village. And that was the White Hare. Lovely little story. It has always been associated that witches could shapeshift into many forms. The main one being cats, dogs, birds sometimes. But especially in parts of England, the hare has always been thought to be a creature of magic, especially a witch in disguise. And as we said in the very beginning of this video, have you ever seen a hare and thought it was a witch in disguise, or is it just another animal? Who knows? Well, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this little story. This will eventually come out on the Spring Equinox. I personally don't celebrate Easter at all, but on the closest day to it, this is the gift I give you, a gift of a hare. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any eggs with it. Oh dear. But once again, thank you, my friends. And I hope to see you again very soon. Take care.